The excavator's bucket struck something that wasn't dirt on the morning of April 15, 2019, 46 years after Millbrook Elementary School's playground had first been built. Construction foreman Jake Martinez felt the metal teeth scrape against what sounded like fabric or plastic, a texture distinctly different from the clay soil and decomposed asphalt they had been removing all week. He shut down the engine and climbed from the cab, his boots sinking into the muddy earth as he approached the shallow trench where something pale and rectangular protruded from the disturbed ground, like a gravestone marking forgotten tragedy. Detective Lisa Reeves received the call at 11:30 a.m. while reviewing case files in her cramped office at the Oakwood Police Department. The construction crew had discovered what appeared to be a metal box buried approximately 4 feet beneath the old swing set area, wrapped in deteriorated plastic sheeting and secured with rusted wire. The school principal had immediately contacted police, recognizing that unusual discoveries during renovation projects often revealed secrets that someone had intended to stay buried forever. Lisa grabbed her evidence kit and drove the 12 minutes to Millbrook Elementary, her mind already cataloging the possibilities. Time capsule, buried treasure, or something far more sinister. The playground renovation had been planned for months as part of a district-wide modernization project funded by a state grant. The original 1973 equipment had become a liability nightmare of rusted chains, splintered wooden platforms, and metal slides that reached dangerous temperatures in the California sun. But what the construction crew had uncovered wasn't part of the playground's intended legacy. The metal box, roughly the size of a large briefcase, bore traces of what appeared to be deliberate concealment. Multiple layers of plastic wrapping, careful positioning beneath what would have been the heaviest trafficked area of the playground, and burial at a depth that suggested someone had invested considerable effort in ensuring it would never be accidentally discovered. Lisa examined the box without disturbing its position, photographing it from multiple angles while noting the corrosion patterns on the metal surface and the condition of the plastic wrapping. The deteriorated material suggested the container had been buried for decades, possibly since the playground's original construction. She called for backup and requested the county coroner's presence, standard procedure when construction projects revealed potentially human remains or evidence of criminal activity. The school was placed on lockdown as a precautionary measure. Children moved to interior classrooms while crime scene technicians established a perimeter around the excavation site. The removal process took 3 hours, each step documented with photographs and measurements that would later prove crucial for establishing the timeline of burial. Lisa worked with archaeological precision, carefully exposing the box while preserving any trace evidence that might have survived 4 decades underground. The plastic wrapping had protected the container from complete deterioration, but moisture had penetrated the seals, suggesting that whatever contents had been preserved might be significantly degraded. Inside the box, Lisa discovered 7 small manila envelopes, each bearing a child's name written in fading ballpoint pen: Jennifer Walsh, Tommy Chen, Maria Santos, David Kim, Ashley Brown, Michael Rodriguez, and Sarah Johnson. The handwriting was careful and deliberate, suggesting someone who had taken time to properly label each envelope despite the clearly illicit nature of the burial. Each envelope contained items that made Lisa's blood run cold: locks of hair tied with ribbons, Polaroid photographs showing children at play, small personal items like hair clips and toy cars, and handwritten notes describing each child's daily routines, favorite activities, and family information. The photographs were particularly disturbing, showing children who appeared to be between 6 and 10 years old engaged in normal playground activities, swinging, sliding, running, laughing, but taken from concealed positions that suggested surveillance rather than innocent documentation. The image quality and film stock were consistent with 1970s and early 1980s photography, and several pictures showed the original Millbrook Elementary playground equipment, confirming that the children had attended the school where their memorabilia was later buried. Lisa immediately began cross-referencing the names with missing persons databases and school enrollment records, working to establish whether the 7 children had disappeared or whether the collection represented something else entirely. The first breakthrough came when she contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, whose comprehensive database included historical cases dating back to the 1970s. 6 of the 7 names matched missing children reports filed between 1979 and 1983 in Oakwood and surrounding communities. Jennifer Walsh, age 7, had disappeared from her backyard on June 14, 1979, while playing with neighborhood friends. Tommy Chen, age 9, had vanished during a family camping trip in August 1980. Maria Santos, age 6, had gone missing from a shopping mall in October 1981. David Kim, age 8, had disappeared while walking home from school in March 1982. Ashley Brown, age 7, had been reported missing from a public park in September 1982. Michael Rodriguez, age 10, had vanished from his bicycle route in January 1983. The seventh child, Sarah Johnson, presented a more complex puzzle. School records confirmed that Sarah Johnson had attended Millbrook Elementary during the 1982-1983 school year, but no missing persons report had ever been filed. Lisa began investigating what had happened to Sarah, discovering that she had moved away with her family in June 1983 according to school transfer records. The presence of her memorabilia in the buried box suggested either that she had been targeted but not victimized, or that something had happened to her that was never reported to authorities. The investigation expanded rapidly as Lisa contacted the original detectives who had worked the missing children cases, most of whom were now retired or deceased. Detective Frank Morrison, who had investigated 3 of the disappearances, agreed to meet with Lisa at a coffee shop in downtown Oakwood. At 78 years old, Morrison carried the weight of unsolved cases that had haunted his career, and the discovery of the buried box brought back memories he had spent decades trying to suppress. "We always suspected the cases were connected," Morrison told Lisa, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee cup as he reviewed copies of the recovered photographs. 6 children disappearing within 4 years, all from the same general area, all between ages 6 and 10. But we never found evidence linking them together. No witnesses, no physical evidence, no suspects who had access to all the locations where the kids vanished. Morrison explained that the 1970s and early 1980s had been a different era for law enforcement, before computerized databases, DNA analysis, or sophisticated behavioral profiling. Each disappearance had been investigated individually, with limited coordination between jurisdictions and no systematic approach to identifying patterns. The buried box represented evidence that would have transformed their understanding of the cases, providing clear proof that a single perpetrator had been stalking and collecting trophies from multiple victims. "The playground burial is significant," Morrison continued, studying the photographs of the excavation site. "Whoever did this had intimate knowledge of the school's construction schedule and access to the site during building. This wasn't random. It was planned by someone who knew the playground would provide perfect concealment for decades." Lisa began researching the construction history of Millbrook Elementary, seeking records of who had worked on the original playground installation in 1973. The school district's archived files revealed that the project had been managed by Oakwood Construction Company, with subcontracting for specialized playground equipment installation. The crew had included both district employees and outside contractors, creating a pool of potential suspects who would have had access to bury evidence during construction. The breakthrough came when Lisa discovered that one of the construction workers, Harold Hank Peterson, had been questioned during the original investigation into Jennifer Walsh's disappearance. Peterson had lived 2 blocks from the Walsh family and had no alibi for the afternoon when Jennifer vanished. However, without additional evidence, he had been cleared, and the investigation had moved in other directions. The construction records showed that Peterson had worked on the Millbrook Playground project and would have had access to bury the box during the installation process. Peterson was now 74 years old and living in an assisted care facility in Riverside, California, his health deteriorated by decades of alcoholism and the physical demands of construction work. Lisa arranged to interview him, knowing that his advanced age and medical condition might make this her only opportunity to question him about the buried evidence. The drive to Riverside took her through suburban communities that had grown exponentially since the 1970s, transforming the rural landscape where children had once disappeared into dense residential developments. Sunny Acres Care Center occupied a converted motel on a busy commercial street, its rooms converted into small apartments for elderly residents who required minimal assistance. Peterson lived in a ground-floor unit furnished with institutional furniture and decorated with photographs that chronicled his life from young construction worker to elderly invalid. He agreed to speak with Lisa, though his mental clarity fluctuated and his memory of events from 40 years earlier was inconsistent. "I remember working on that playground," Peterson acknowledged when Lisa showed him photographs of the construction site. "Good job, lots of overtime pay because they wanted it finished before school started. We worked long hours, sometimes stayed late to get everything ready." Lisa presented the evidence methodically, showing Peterson photographs of the buried box and its contents without initially revealing their significance. She watched his facial expressions carefully, noting reactions that might indicate recognition or deception. When she showed him the photographs of the 7 children, his demeanor changed subtly, his eyes focusing more intently on the images. "Kids always fascinated me," Peterson said, his voice taking on a different quality. "So innocent, so trusting. They don't understand how dangerous the world can be, how adults might hurt them. I used to watch them playing, trying to protect them from predators who might be lurking nearby. The admission was disturbing in its ambiguity, suggesting either genuine concern for child safety or the rationalization of predatory behavior. Lisa pressed for more specific information about his interactions with children during the early 1980s, his knowledge of the families whose children had disappeared, and his activities during the time periods when the abductions had occurred. "Memory isn't what it used to be," Peterson replied when asked about specific dates and locations, "but I do remember being worried about Jennifer Walsh, sweet little girl who used to wave at me when I drove past her house. When she disappeared, I thought maybe I should have been watching more carefully, maybe I could have prevented something terrible from happening." Lisa recognized the careful balance between admission and denial that characterized many conversations with suspected predators. Peterson was acknowledging knowledge of the victims while presenting himself as a protector rather than a threat. His references to watching children and knowing their routines aligned with the detailed information found in the buried box, but he maintained the pretense of benevolent surveillance. The interview continued for 2 hours, with Peterson providing fragments of information that seemed significant but remained frustratingly incomplete. He admitted to having special feelings for children, to collecting photographs and memorabilia that reminded him of kids he had known, and to burying items that were important to him. But he never directly confessed to kidnapping or harming anyone, instead presenting himself as a misunderstood man whose love for children had been misconstrued. "Sometimes people don't understand that you can care about children without wanting to hurt them," Peterson said as the interview concluded. "I kept things that reminded me of kids who had been taken by someone else, someone really dangerous. I wanted to preserve their memory, to make sure they weren't forgotten." Lisa left the care facility with more questions than answers, but with enough information to justify expanding the investigation. Peterson's admissions, while carefully qualified, suggested knowledge of the crimes that went beyond innocent concern. His access to the burial site, his surveillance of potential victims, and his collection of memorabilia created a compelling circumstantial case for his involvement in the disappearances. The investigation intensified over the following months, with Lisa working to build a comprehensive case against Peterson. She interviewed his former coworkers, neighbors, and anyone who might have observed suspicious behavior during the early 1980s. The process was complicated by the passage of time. Many potential witnesses had died or moved away, and memories of events from 40 years earlier were unreliable even when people were willing to cooperate. A significant breakthrough came when Lisa located Eleanor Martinez, who had worked as a crossing guard at Millbrook Elementary during the 1982-1983 school year. Martinez, now in her 80s but mentally sharp, remembered Peterson visiting the school frequently during the playground construction and continuing to appear near the campus even after the project was completed. "He always had excuses for being there," Martinez recalled during an interview at her daughter's home. "Sometimes he said he was checking on his work. Sometimes he claimed to be delivering supplies or meeting with maintenance staff. But I noticed he spent a lot of time watching the children during recess and lunch periods. He had binoculars in his truck and would sit in the parking lot for hours." Martinez's testimony provided crucial evidence of Peterson's continued surveillance of the school after his legitimate work had ended. Her observations aligned with the timeline of several disappearances and suggested that he had been actively stalking potential victims in the school environment. The binoculars explained how he had been able to photograph children from concealed positions without being detected by teachers or playground supervisors. "There was something about his behavior that made me uncomfortable," Martinez continued. "The way he watched the children was too intense, too focused. Normal adults might glance at kids playing, but he studied them like he was memorizing their faces and movements. I reported my concerns to the principal, but nothing came of it." Lisa discovered that Martinez's concerns had indeed been documented in school security reports, but the principal who had received them had dismissed them as the overactive imagination of an elderly crossing guard. The reports had been filed away and forgotten, representing another missed opportunity to identify Peterson as a threat before more children disappeared. The case against Peterson was strengthened when forensic analysis of the buried box revealed fingerprints that had survived 4 decades underground. The prints matched samples obtained from Peterson during his original questioning in 1979, providing physical evidence linking him directly to the buried memorabilia. DNA analysis of the hair samples found in the envelopes confirmed that they had come from the 7 children whose names appeared on the labels. District Attorney Patricia Moss reviewed the evidence in October 2019, 6 months after the playground excavation had revealed the buried box. The meeting took place in her downtown office, with Lisa presenting her findings to a room that included prosecutors, forensic specialists, and victim advocates representing the families of the disappeared children. The case was unusual because 5 of the 7 children had never been found, making it difficult to prove that murders had actually occurred rather than kidnappings with unknown outcomes. "The evidence is compelling but largely circumstantial," Moss acknowledged after reviewing all available materials. "We can prove that Peterson buried the box and collected memorabilia from the children, but establishing that he actually killed them requires making assumptions about their fate. Without bodies or direct evidence of homicide, we're looking at kidnapping charges that may be difficult to prosecute after 40 years. Lisa understood the prosecutor's concerns, but argued that the totality of evidence justified criminal charges. The buried box contained clear trophies from multiple victims. Peterson had admitted to surveilling children and collecting their memorabilia, and his access to the burial site during construction provided opportunity for concealment. While the case might not result in murder convictions, it could still provide justice for the families and closure for the community. The decision to file charges was complicated by Peterson's deteriorating health and questionable mental competency. Medical evaluations revealed advancing dementia that affected his ability to understand legal proceedings and assist in his own defense. The court would need to determine whether he was mentally fit to stand trial, a process that could take months while his condition continued to decline. Before the competency hearings could be completed, Harold Peterson suffered a massive stroke on December 3, 2019, and died at Riverside General Hospital without regaining consciousness. He was 74 years old and had never been formally charged with any crimes related to the 7 missing children. Any secrets he might have carried about their ultimate fate died with him, leaving families with partial answers and communities with unresolved questions about justice delayed too long. The discovery of the playground box had provided crucial evidence about the connected nature of the disappearances, but Peterson's death prevented the full accountability that families had hoped to achieve. Lisa felt the familiar frustration of cold case investigations that ended without complete resolution, knowing that significant progress had been made, but ultimate justice remained elusive. The families of the missing children received notification of Peterson's death with mixed emotions. Parents who had spent 40 years wondering about their children's fate finally had confirmation that their worst fears were likely justified, but they also lost the opportunity to hear direct admissions about what had happened and where their children might be buried. The knowledge brought a form of closure, while highlighting the pain of questions that would never be fully answered. Jennifer Walsh's mother, Margaret, now 71 years old, had never stopped searching for her daughter despite 4 decades of false leads and dead ends. The discovery of Jennifer's hair and photographs in the buried box provided the first concrete evidence of what had happened. But Margaret struggled with the realization that her daughter had likely been dead for most of her adult life. "Part of me always hoped she was alive somewhere, maybe with amnesia, or being held against her will," Margaret told Lisa during their final official meeting. "Finding out that someone was collecting trophies from her death. It's horrible, but it's also relief. I can stop wondering if I'll see her walking down the street someday. I can finally grieve properly." The investigation had revealed the systematic nature of Peterson's crimes and provided families with long-sought answers about their children's disappearances. While criminal prosecution wasn't possible, the evidence established a clear pattern of predatory behavior that had claimed 7 young victims over a 4-year period. The playground burial site had preserved crucial evidence that might otherwise have been lost forever, serving as an unintended time capsule that eventually delivered a form of justice. Sarah Johnson, the 7th child whose memorabilia had been found in the box, was located living in Oregon under her married name. Now 46 years old, she remembered Peterson as a construction worker who had paid unusual attention to her during her final months at Millbrook Elementary. She recalled feeling uncomfortable around him but had never understood why, until Lisa explained what had been discovered. "He used to watch me walking home from school," Sarah told Lisa during a phone interview. "I remember telling my parents that the construction man made me nervous, but they said I was being silly. When we moved away in June 1983, I was actually relieved because it meant I wouldn't have to see him anymore." Sarah's survival suggested that Peterson's pattern had been interrupted, possibly by her family's relocation or by increased security awareness following the previous disappearances. Her memorabilia in the buried box indicated that she had been targeted as a potential victim, but circumstances had prevented her from sharing the fate of the other 6 children. The Millbrook Elementary playground was completed in September 2019, featuring modern safety equipment and security measures that reflected 4 decades of advancement in child protection. A small memorial garden was installed near the site where the buried box had been discovered, honoring the 7 children whose names had been found in the container. The memorial included benches where families could sit and remember, surrounded by flowers that bloomed throughout the school year. Lisa closed the case file in January 2020, adding a final report that detailed her investigation's findings and the evidence that connected Harold Peterson to the 7 missing children. The buried box was retained in evidence storage, its contents serving as a permanent record of crimes that had traumatized a community and destroyed multiple families. While criminal prosecution hadn't been possible, the investigation had provided answers that had eluded law enforcement for 4 decades. The case became a teaching example for other investigators working cold cases involving missing children. Lisa presented her findings at law enforcement conferences, explaining how construction projects and urban development could reveal evidence that had been deliberately concealed for decades. Her methodology for investigating historical crimes became a model for similar cases involving predators who had used their professional access to conceal evidence. The 7 families affected by Peterson's crimes formed a support group that continued meeting monthly, sharing memories of their lost children and supporting each other through the complex emotions that accompanied the investigation's revelations. They advocated for improved child safety measures and helped other families navigate the trauma of having missing children. Their advocacy contributed to legislative changes that enhanced coordination between law enforcement agencies investigating crimes against children. Detective Frank Morrison, who had worked the original missing children cases, attended the Memorial Garden dedication ceremony at Millbrook Elementary. At 79 years old, he walked with a cane and moved slowly, but his presence represented the continuous commitment of law enforcement to seek justice for victims, regardless of how much time had passed. He placed flowers at the memorial for each of the 6 children whose cases he had investigated, finally able to provide their families with the answers he had sought for 40 years. Police work teaches you that justice doesn't always come quickly or completely, Morrison told the assembled families and community members. But it also teaches you that truth has a way of surfacing eventually, even when it's been buried deep and forgotten. These children weren't forgotten, and the person who hurt them didn't escape accountability forever. The playground at Millbrook Elementary serves hundreds of children each year, their laughter and play creating new memories over the site where evidence of old crimes was discovered. The Memorial Garden provides a quiet space for reflection, reminding visitors that the protection of children requires constant vigilance and community commitment. The buried box that revealed Harold Peterson's crimes had been intended to hide evidence forever, but instead became the key that unlocked decades of mystery and provided families with the truth they had never stopped seeking. Lisa Reeves continued investigating cold cases, always mindful that construction projects and urban development might reveal evidence that had been deliberately concealed by criminals who believed their secrets were safely buried. The playground case had taught her that physical evidence could survive for decades when properly preserved, waiting for the right moment to emerge and provide justice for victims whose names had been written on envelopes and buried beneath the innocent sounds of children at play.